So he wants to now proceed to explain the hafla, the extraordinary and wondrous quality of Bria Yesh Ma'ayin, that was in full revelation on the first day of creation, subsequently concealed. To understand the hafla of Bria Yesh Ma'ayin is to contrast it with another relative kind of creation, namely Ila va'olul, cause and effect. And so by understanding how Ila va'olul works, and notwithstanding the great distance from the Ila, the cause, to the Olul, to the effect, and then realizing that Yesh Ma'ayin is incomparably beyond that as well. So it further deepens our appreciation of this Chashus Habriya. So this is what he's going to explain of the next two Osiyas. Should be Yesh Ma'ayin. In order to understand that flaw, literally the wondrousness of the Bria Yesh Ma'ayin, Yesh Lahaktim Tchila, we should first preface in that flaw, the wondrousness Yesh Afilu Bishtalshalos Ilu V'Olo, that exists also even in the process of Ishtalshalos, the chain of worlds, which operates in the principle of Ilu V'Olo, cause and effect, chain as in chain reaction. So looking at the way things proceed from the cause to the effect, as we learned in the previous Maimir, it's not that the essence of the Ila itself becomes, morphs and manifests in the effect. Ella, not so. What's drawn from the cause is only an external glimmer, as it were. It's known the principle from the Eitz Chaim, it's the external level of the upper that now becomes the defined content of the lower, the Tachta. It's only a tenth of the upper level of the cause. And in truth, we don't just mean a tenth in terms of dividing it up into 10 and taking a tenth. That's not the intent here. We don't mean a 10% of the cause is invested in the effect. We don't mean this not in quantity, not in quality, but kim darge asiris bilvad. We mean the 10th level. And the 10th level, which is the, relatively speaking, malchus level of each level. Malchus, as we know, is a different order, completely incomparable to the madreges above it. It's not just the 10th and lowest rung, and it's certainly not 10%, as it were, of the gilui, the oir above it, but it's altogether a chitzonius dika. It's altogether external, and that is what is invested and produces the level below it. Illustrates this. Commission on the Roim, yeah, we're clear. Commission on the Roim, Bashpos, Asechem Marav, the Talmud, like we see in the process of the Rav, the master, giving over a concept to the disciple, to the Talmud. We're not talking here about the seichel as it is, as the master entertains the idea. But we're talking here about, as he's a Rabbi, as a teacher, and this is the process of teaching. So first, in the process of teaching, there's the seichel that it's shaykh to begin with to the recipient. He doesn't even entertain the notion of conveying the depth of the concept as the Rav knows it. That's not on the table. To begin with, he's giving that which is shaykh. And this itself is given over as an akud, as a point in point form. And that is the level of chokhmah now in the process of the hashpah. The process of the hashpah itself. Not to be confused with the chokhmah within the Rav. That's his world. Now he is conveying it to the Talmud. So the whole process has to go through this Trishtalshalus, 10 levels. And it's the 10th level, the word, Malchus, that the Talmud finally gets as the master speaks. But behind those words is this whole process of Hashpah, beginning with Chochmah and ending with the Nekuda. The master has to rethink the whole idea in putting himself, as it were, in the state of a recipient of a Talmud. And the whole process begins first by just bringing it all and expressing it in a central Likud, a central idea. Then, and then this is all again for the world of the Makabel. Sorry, he then has to break it down, the faret, and to express it in detail and to reveal the details of the Nekuda. That is Bina. You still can't convey it straight from there in words. There's a whole process still. And this is all based on what the Rabbi in the Geras HaKodesh. And then the master has to engage his emotions. There cannot be hashpah to the other. He can't give over something to somebody else if there's not some level of emotional engagement and connection. And what is that? First and foremost, number one, chesed. And what's that? He has to want to give it over. And he has to have desire to do it. A teacher that doesn't want to teach, obviously, will be completely ineffective. And then, of course, Gevura has to kick in. How much to convey and to give it boundaries and to limit it, to limit the expression of his chesed, of his love. This is not a loving relationship right now in the classroom. He's teaching. So chesed has to fuel it all, but it has to be contained by Gevura for many reasons, just to maintain the discipline, the respect in the classroom, etc. It's not a father embrace now, it's giving over a concept. So there's the Gevura. Mind you, even in embrace you need Gevura. Not to hug the child too tightly, not to overwhelm him with love. So even in that kind of hashpah of a father to a son, this is also all true. But particularly in the Rav and the Talmud. So then comes Gevura. And then there has to be the midah of tiferes, and he's scalalos the chesed the Gevura. Then he has to balance and blend the two. They be in the proper, appropriate mix. It all depends on which on the level of the Talmidim. Is it a bit more chesed, a bit more Gevura? That has to be taken into account. So that's tiferes. Even after going through Chochmah, Bina, and of course Das, which is the connection that's implied, doesn't have to be spelled out. And then Chesed and Gevura, and it's still beyond the actual Ashpah, the actual giving over, the actual teaching. We're still talking till now, as the idea has not been communicated at all. It's still within the Mashpia. What are we talking about? The Mashpia in his own mind has left his own world, and it's all engaging the seichel as it is shaykh to the makabel, to the recipient. But then there has to be what? Then you need netzach v'hoid. Now, there's many layers to what this means, but here explains also from Tanya in Kabbalah, and she actually from the Gemara. The Gemara says, the Gemara identifies, he brings here the order, brachas. At the end of Masechta Brachas, the Gemara identifies the different parts of the physical body and what they contribute to the personality and what kind of properties they are the source of joy, etc., intellect, obviously. Now, the Netzach V'Hoid are called kloyos yoitzais, the kidneys that give advice. Don't ask me to explain this more than that, but somehow, I think I once heard some kind of scientific, someone mentioned something. Aaron, was it you? Someone mentioned something, some connection between some discovery. Anyway, between
I mentioned it. I mentioned it. I mentioned it concerning Dr. Resnick. When he was walking the Rebbe after he used to walk the Rebbe from his house to 770. He once told him.
Who told who?
The Dr. Resnick mentioned, if I'm not mistaken, how there was a medical discovery how the kidneys got to do with Eitzah.
Oh, so we don't know.
There was a lot. I don't know. There was very interested.
Well, maybe someone can research that on. So anyway, what's the Eitzah?
I think Ephraim sent out. Ephraim.
Yeah, right. Yeah. He sent
Raleigh. He sent something out about it. I don't remember, but we could.
No, it was about the story of Rosen, Dr. Rosen. But I don't know if we have any scientific, medical attachment to it. I don't recall. Okay, we'll try and look into it again. At any rate, so the klois, so what does it mean? What's the role now of the kidneys, of the advice? What's the advice that's required now? The counsel, the counsel required to have an effective hashpah, an effective communication, effective teaching. What is that? So we have to change and to bring it down and make it more tangible. Bearing in mind the exact student or students, here we speak of one student. It's much more challenging when you're teaching to a class, obviously, far more challenging. But even the one student, he has to tailor it to the student, and this requires counsel. And moreover, another property of Netzach v'Hoid, which he speaks in Tanya, and that is V'gam Netzach v'Hoid. Netzach means to be victorious, which means to overcome obstacles. The teacher has to overcome his own resistance to teach. Why would there be resistance? The Alter Rebbe says there is the child really worthy? Is this going to be successful? Etc. So there's this internal opposition that the nitzachen, militant nitzachen, has to overcome. Also external obstacles, all kinds of obstacles. That doesn't go into detail here. Which would stop the hashpah. That addresses it actually in more detail in Geras HaKodesh, which I'm sharing with you. And then it's Bechinas Yisoid. So that's a Netzach. It doesn't address Hoid, but Hoid in general is bittul. Is getting down to the level of the Talmud. From Loshen Heidah, which he doesn't mention now. Ubechinas Yisoid, and what's Yisoid? And then finally Malchus, he says it, he talks. But what's Yisoid? Inyan Yiskashros, Yisoid is bonding. Yiskashros, Mashpia B'Mekabel, it's the bonding, the connection with the Mashpia and the Mekabel. Bonding means many things, as we're learning in our Rabbi Jacobs, the Simon Jacobs' wonderful book, The Counting of the Omer. It's empathy, bonding, really connecting. And finally, he opens his mouth and he speaks after this whole internal process, which is all cause and effect. One level chain reaction. First Chachma, then Binah, we can see how it all, one is connected to the other. And then comes the words, that's Malchus. Malchus is the word. On a simple level, the king, Malchus, governs through speech. That's the actual communication. Explained at length in the Geras HaKodesh. Now, having said all of this, he started before saying that Hashpah is only a tenth, and he quickly qualified that. We don't mean that a tenth either in quantity or in quality. It's a whole different state of being. And we can see how Malchus, just the final word on its own, it's a completely different, expression of the nefesh of the Rav, in contrast to all the other levels of the hashpah. Never mind the Rav himself, but just the hashpah itself. The Nekudas HaSeichel, as he's going through the process of effectively communicating it, the final word is incomparable in terms of the nefesh's output to the other stages that precede it. It's chitzonius and ha'ora, in the words of the beginning of the ois. So, now even further, again, that the seichel that's given over to the Talmud, we don't even call it a tenth. Not in quantity or quality. Because now comes the point here, this tzimtzum. We want to appreciate the process of tzimtzum between each level, which points to the disparity between the upper and the lower. Notwithstanding that disparity, the whole point of the end will be that yesh ma'ayin is incomparably beyond that in terms of the distance between the yesh and the ayin, or the yesh and the force that brings it into being. But first, again, this elaboration here in the whole process of the tzimtzum, ishtalshalos. On every stage in the process, when we go from Chachma to Bina, and then Bina to the Midas and Midas, and so on, so as each level descends, so notwithstanding the fact that it's a chain reaction, that's true, but still there's a tremendous tzimtzum and a lessening of the upper level in order to produce the lower level. And therefore the lower level, that's a result of the tzimtzum, is completely unlike the way it is in its upper level, the upper state within the cause. So when we say when we say it's the 10th level, we don't mean, again, quantity and quality, but level. It's a 10th level, it's a 10th plane, a whole different level. Speech, word, compared to all of the levels described before. Now, in Luchnius, we're clear, this was clear, folks, yeah? So likewise, Beruchnius in the creation of the worlds, the chain of worlds. Like it says in Medrash, that there's no blade of grass below. That doesn't have a spiritual source called a mazel, a malach. The word mazel has many meanings. One is, it means constellation, but also implied here, mind you, some kind of constellation within the constellations, but also means a malach, and the mazel also means to flow down from a source. So there's no blade of grass that doesn't have its own unique source, hamakeboy, which strikes it. The Imalayan says, Gadel, grow. Interesting analysis in the Lashon of this Maimon Chazal, in the square brackets coming out. The Lashon Zatzmei Mucher. Then what are we talking about here? We're not talking about the creation, yesh me'ayin, of the fruit or of the blade of grass, but its growth. We're not talking about the creation of the fruit or the blade of grass. That's a whole different investure. We're talking about its growth and its properties. So we're talking about the evolution of the seed producing the fruit, whatever it ends up producing. So there's this constant input of the mazel striking it, as it were, prodding it, and that's the ilu v'olu process we just described before. We're not talking about its actual emergence of yesh ma'ayin, which is going to come the contrast later, but it's present and its growth. He continues. Let's look at the final fruit that's grown and trace back where it comes from. Actually identifies the one property of the fruit is sweetness. So, where does the sweetness, the sweet property in this fruit, this particular fruit that we speak of, where does it come from? It's nishtalshel from the sweetness that exists at the level of the mazel baruchnius lamayla. But the movement itself understood that the physical sweetness of the fruit, it's completely distant and incomparable. The sweetness of the mazel, which is a purely ruchnisdik, a spiritual property. Illustrates this. Even lower levels of sweetness which are incomparable. Never mind the sweetness, the sweet property of a mazel. For example, the sweetness of a fruit ain't a doimbel and mesikish midatova. Talk about a sweet person. So he has a sweet disposition, the sweetness of a good character trait. We use the same language, but of course it's completely incomparable to the physical sensation and experience of the sweet fruit. And yet it's the same word. So the am nishtalshel, it doesn't mean here, it means baruchnius. The sweetness of the fruit is nishtalsha from the midah, lemaila of sweetness. And you just drew the parallel in our own world. We can see the incomparability of these two kinds of sweetness. Likewise, lemaila. And then now let's talk about the midah, so the sweet person. But that in the doime la mesika shebeseichel, to the sweetness of an intellectual idea. It's interesting that the Rebbe in Likutei Sichos employs this language. I don't know if it's that much common anywhere else in the Achronim. And as you all know, if you learn the Rashi Sichos, the Rebbe asks a host of questions. And first some of the questions are like very obvious questions, and some of them are more subtle questions. A turn of phrase, why he quotes the sage, etc. And Rebbe would introduce the answer by saying, and having said, we said till now, will make sweet this nuance. It's a nuance. It doesn't change the overall understanding of what Rashi is saying, and all the basic questions we had on Rashi have been resolved. We understand what Rashi is coming to answer. We understand everything that he's saying, but this little detail adds an overall sweetness to the intellectual appreciation. Now that sweetness, which actually would even might cause you to smile when you learn it, that's not comparable to the sweetness of a sweet midah of doing a tova, of a sweet character trait. But yet it's sweet, and they're all interconnected. One devolves or is produced from the other. But through what? Through a process of tzimtzum, as we can see that the cause and effect are different worlds. The mesikus of the seichel is a different world than the mesikus of a midah, which is a different world than the mesikus of an apple, of a fruit. As he continues. Now looking at the seichel and looking at its source, where does that sweetness come from? The kolshkein, shamesikus shebeseichel. How much more so the mesikus of seichel as we know it? Ain't our seichel. Ain't a daimon, that's incomparable, although it devolves from it. The sweetness of the lofty spiritual sources, the sichlim, nivdolim, and the transcendent angels. Nivdolim means transcendent intellectual beings, the seraphim, and so on, that they grasp, they understand godliness, and they have a profound sweetness in their grasp. So our sweetness in learning is incomparable to the purely ruchnisdika and godly sweetness that the sichlim, this is Lashon Rambam, sichlim nivdolim, these elevated intellectual beings experience. Still, after having appreciated the great distance between these levels of sweetness, at the end of the day, they're all connected, and one produces the other. It is precisely the sweetness of the mazel that is the ultimate cause. the sweetness of the fruit. And therefore, Va'ila Yeshla is a kid of la'olo. Now, obviously, the cause has some kind of closeness, some kind of relationship with the effect. As evidenced, it's from, in fact, the sweet property of the mazel that nishtalshel, that then descends and becomes the pri and manifests in the fruit. In Yeshal Masikas Dafke, what it produces is nothing other than sweetness, its own kind, its own property. Its own property is what's produced in the effect. It doesn't produce something else. We trace back this property of sweetness. So there's this kiruv. Meaning to say, if the sweetness of the mazel that produces the sweetness of the fruit would be completely disconnected, incomparable, unrelatable at all, in the sweetness of this property of sweetness, which is relatively, now we say, infinite. If it would be infinite, infinite means, as we're saying, and not in the world completely of the fruit, then that sweetness could produce anything, because it's infinite. Anything relative to the world of the fruit. But the fact that Mesikas only produces sweetness, it means that its creative involvement is bekiruv, it's giving of itself on some level, which is why it only produces likeness. And it's not be'ein aroich. It's not his avos that's mamish be'ein aroich. It's in the world of the mekabel, but a far loftier plane. And so lofty that we can all appreciate it. How do you compare the sweetness of a fruit to the sweetness of a malach? But there is sweetness here. So all to say, he wants to bring out, we should appreciate the haflah here. The haflah, the great distance, and yet it's be'erech. All in contrast to yesh ma'ayin, which is not be'erech fundamentally. And the whole point would be, and that's ongoing in the bringing into being of everything at every moment. Yizgal and Yom Rishon, and as he said, we visit the Zayir again, Yom Tov, and in fact every day, as we say, Machadash B'tuv B'chol Yom Tov. But now continuing our appreciation of that by the contrast to Ila V'Olo. Let's continue.
Question: why are you saying Azai Hoya actually Havas Menu Gamahos Acher? What is he referring to? Mahos Acher, another type of sweetness, or
no,
maybe
no,
not a sweetness?
Not entirely. If the Mesikas of the mazel would be relative to the mesikas of the fruit, would be bli gvul mamish. So bli gvul can create anything. When it expresses itself, it can create anything in the world of the fruit, any property of fruit, anything. Why dafke mesikas? So it's not truly bli gvul. It's not mamish bli gvul.
Not only an apple, but
anything. It could create anything.
Then that wouldn't be ilba'ol.
Could produce anything.
It wouldn't be ilba'ol.
Huh?
Then it wouldn't be ilba'ol.
That's what he's saying. That's the fact that's his point. The fact that the misik, exactly what he's saying. The fact that the misikas of the sweetness of the mazel produces dafke the misikas in the fruit tells us it's not be'ein aroich. It's rather ilav olol. Ilav olol means not be'ein aroich, notwithstanding. But the whole point of this ice is it's tak at the end of the day not be'ein aroich. But afal piken, there is a kiruv. I'm sorry. It's not be'ein aroich, but look at the huge distance. Look at the huge disparity between cause and effect. Tak not be'ein aroich, and it's bekiruv. But when we say kiruv, wow, that's like a very tenuous kiruv. There's this connection, but it's not like it's in the same world. The mesikas of seichel is not the same mesikas as midas and seichel agabe the mazel. So he wants to bring out the distance and yet say it's a distance, not be'ein aroich. Whereas yesh ma'ayin, that's be'ein aroich. That's what he wants to bring out. All right, we'll stop here. I mean, we'll finish the sentence. Till the end of the set. Of the mazel. It produces dafka mesikas. It means it's not be'en aroich. It's not beligvul. We're not talking yesh ma'ayin here. So it must mean it's a chain, cause and effect, where the cause is responsible for this effect only and not something else, which means it's bekirav. Sha'ila yesh lakirav la'olo, that the cause has this closeness and therefore comparability at the end of the day with the effect. They're not in fundamentally different worlds. Relatively, yes, but not essentially. And then Beis Hashem tomorrow, another moshel from going back to the moshel of the Rav and the Talmud.
A quick question: If the mazel would create a sour apple instead of a sweet apple, would that be yesh mi'ayin?
No, that's a different mazel. Well, that would be in the mazel gufa a different property. I'm
saying on a sweet apple tree, you're going to have sour apples. Just asking you.
No, so that's no. This, if they don't end up turning sweet, whatever it is, that's because there's also the union of gevura and other properties that the mazel has. It's not just the sweetness. We're just identifying the sweetness, but all of the properties that exist, not in the being of not the yesh ma'ayin component of the apple, but its properties, its tchunas, that's all traceable to a source l'mayla. You're just saying sweetness. There's whole lots of other properties as well that the mazel has that manifest and produce these properties in the fruit. So it's all traceable. It's all traceable, notwithstanding the great distance. That's what he's trying to contrast here. There's a huge disparity between cause and effect, Rav and Talmud, but it's not be'en haroich. The Talmud can become a Rav himself one day, maybe even greater than the Rav. But in the world right now, they're very, very far apart, but not in a way of bligvul. It's still ilavolol. It's still interconnected in a chain reaction. That's all to make us appreciate it. However, it's chashish yesh ma'ayin, the total bittul of the yesh to the ayin, because it's totally incomparable. We're talking bligvul, true bligvul, and gvul. So these are words we can just bandy around and infinite, finite. The Maimon is relentlessly and in the previous way, illustration by illustration, making us appreciate what we mean by ischachos yesh ma'ayin, by contrasting it with ilah v'olam. All right, which b'hashgacha pratis dovetails with the story we're going to share this morning. On this very auspicious day of Lag BaOmer, which starts the whole Gilui Achsidus, as we all know, begins with the Rashbi, and then for millennia concealed, and then finally emerging the Arizal, the Baal Shem Tov, and the whole process up to our Rebbe as we stand on the eve of Geula. All right, what's with me now? I thought I put the paper in. I'm sorry. Bear with me. I'll have to find it. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. Oh, go find it. It's like 200 stories here. 188 stories. Where was it? Okay, I'm just going to search the pages here. I need to see it inside. Sorry. Oh. My apologies. The story with Reb Chaim Brisker and the Alter Rebbe. Reb Chaim Volozhiner, as they called him. The Talmud Muvik of the Vilna Gaon, and the founder of the Soloveitchik dynasty, and the Brisk dynasty, the Brisk Rabbanim. Okay, I'm not seeing it. Okay, guys, once you start davening, we can prepare for davening, and I'll find it. Where's our show? Okay, prepare for davening. I want you to waste your time. I don't recall beginning, the end of the book, I don't know where it was. Okay.
Tomorrow, 2 stories.
Can't hear you, what?
Tomorrow you'll do 2 stories in the same time.
Yeah, tomorrow 2 stories. Actually, what I'll do is, now I'll post it. I'll just send it. Okay, go, Davin. Let me stop the recording here.